Welcome once again to the Hockey Lifers. Jeff Marek along with you. The program is always brought to you by PenFed Credit Union. Great rates for everyone. And today we have a great guest to share with you. Now, as I record this podcast, it is the middle of the afternoon on Monday. So we've had 2 full days of the playoffs. So there's no point in me going granular all through all the games because you've watched them, you've talked about them, you've dissected them. I am going to share a couple of thoughts on a few things, point your interest maybe in a couple of different directions. But the main focus of today's program is going to be my conversation with Ryan Miller. 18 seasons in the NHL, played with the Buffalo Sabres, plenty on the Buffalo Sabres, and welcome back Buffalo Sabres to the playoffs. Played with the St. Louis Blues, of course, played with the Anaheim Ducks, played with the Vancouver Canucks, played for Team USA at the 2010 Vancouver Games, silver medal there. Congratulations. He was MVP of the tournament. But before we get to the Ryan Miller interview, and he is just, by the way, like one of the most thoughtful goaltenders this game has ever seen. And in a lot of ways, he does break the stereotype that we all have about the crazy goalie, the erratic goalie. Oh, what do you call the people that goaltenders hang out with? Athletes. Those are the old jokes about goaltenders and stereotypes. The thing about Ryan Miller, and if you followed his career, you know this about Ryan Miller. He is thoughtful. He is measured. Just like when he played net, there was an economy of movement that he had. Everything had a purpose. Everything had a direction. And everything he did was deliberate, just like the interview that you're going to hear in a couple of moments. Again, very measured, very thoughtful, nothing frivolous. It is all business. Ryan Miller, that's coming up in a couple of seconds. Now, the main reason we wanted to have Ryan Miller on today was because the Buffalo Sabres welcomed themselves back into the playoffs after 14 dark seasons. Matter of fact, they haven't made the playoffs going back to the Milan Lucic Ryan Miller incident. But the Buffalo Sabres, like, what would it have been like? Think about what it would be like to be a Buffalo Sabres fan. I don't know about you, but I always put myself in this position when I see teams do great things. Like when the Washington Capitals finally won the Stanley Cup, all I think a lot of us could think to ourselves was, what would it be like to be a Washington Capitals fan right now, watching this team finally win the Stanley Cup? If you followed them from stem to stern, the early days, the dark days, the worst franchise in the NHL, and now they reached the highest of highs. Or when an expansion team like the Vegas Golden Knights wins the Stanley Cup within like the first 5 minutes of their existence. What's it got to be like to be in a pretty much a brand spanking new market, to watch your team win the Stanley Cup and say to all these other teams around the NHL that have been slugging for it for a number of years, winning the Stanley Cup is really not that hard after all. Look at us. We just started 5 minutes ago and already we got one of these things. But just imagine for 1 second what it must have felt like to be a Buffalo Sabres fan on Sunday evening, even just with the players coming out onto the ice and the anthems. One thing I do want to point out about the anthems in Buffalo, which is such a unique experience. Buffalo, as we all know, is a border city. And for me, it's a wonderful NHL market because it is the bringing together of American and Canadian fans. There's a number of season ticket holders from Canada in the sort of St. Catharines to Hamilton corridor that have always claimed Buffalo and the Sabres as their own. This goes back to 1970 when the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks came into existence in the NHL. So it's a coming together of Canadian and American fans all over this one team, the Buffalo Sabres, and each country brings its own personality to the rink, and you see it mix really well in Buffalo. What would that have been like to hear both national anthems? Like, that's a game where Boston plays Buffalo, and still, even if it's just 2 American teams playing, they play the Canadian national anthem as well, because the Sabres know a big part of their population base and their fans exist on the other side of the border. It's a beautiful coming together of 2 great hockey cultures. And speaking of beautiful moments, to me, the highlight of the weekend was Sandra Jeanneret, the wife of the late Rick Jeanneret, longtime play-by-play voice of the Buffalo Sabres, banging the drum before the game to get Sabres fans all wound up. The Buffalo Sabres have always been blessed with great play-by-play voices. And this goes back to their first season with Dave Hodge. And then it was Ted Darling. That was the voice that I grew up with. Ted Darling, the French Connection, going to the Stanley Cup final against the Philadelphia Flyers in 75. That was the voice that I grew up with. But also Pete Weber. And also, as I just mentioned, Rick Benneret and now Dan Dunleavy has a tremendous call for the Buffalo Sabres. They've always been blessed with great broadcast crews. And they've always been blessed with great fans. And it must have felt like the cork being popped out of a champagne bottle when that team hit the ice, and then even more so taking it to a whole nother level when Tage Thompson scores the first of 2 goals to get the Buffalo Sabres on the board and back into that game. I've seen, because I've gone to plenty of Buffalo Sabres games over the years, growing up in Toronto. I went to Buffalo games all the time at the Odd, right through when I went to university. And candidly, it was just cheaper to go to Buffalo Sabres games than it was to go to Toronto Maple Leafs games. We were starving students. We were very poor. We were on a budget. We were going to Buffalo Sabres games. But I got to see Pat LaFontaine, and I got to see Alexander McGillney, and I got to see that era of Buffalo Sabres at a fraction of what it would have cost me to go to see the Toronto Maple Leafs at that time. Imagine what it must have felt like to be in that building. Going to get to Ryan Miller here in a second. A couple of things I want to point out too. I still don't think that Dallas is done. I know if you look at game 1, the Minnesota Wild did whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, however they wanted. Brock Faber was outstanding. Matt Zuccarello was tremendous. Joel Eriksson Ek continues to be one of the best kept secrets in the NHL. You can play him in any situation, 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill, it doesn't matter. He's effective everywhere. Kirill Kaprizov made a shot on Jake Ottinger that only a handful of players can make. Minnesota did whatever they wanted against Dallas over the weekend, but I have a hard time believing, even though they are a little bit banged up and no Rupe Hintz as we record this in the lineup for game 2, I still think that we have more to come from Dallas. The other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to as well, playoffs are great for emerging players, right? That's where you make legends. That's where you earn your reputation. That's where stars are born. It's great to do things in the regular season. We all love it. We follow it along, from October to April. We're right there every game, every shift, every shot, every power play, all of it. But you become legendary in the playoffs. That's where your performances really matter. And to that end, the hat trick by Yuri Slafkovsky, the Montreal Canadiens, going into hostile territory, facing off against the Tampa Bay Lightning in game 1. And what do we all know about Tampa? As highly skilled and as well coached as the Tampa Bay Lightning are, they still like to put an accent on physicality and a pack mentality. You hit one of theirs, you fight all of theirs. That's the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Montreal went in there. Now, Montreal does have the experience going back to last year against the Washington Capitals. So the playoffs aren't new for this version of the Habs, bowing out against Washington, as we all know, last season, punctuated by a Josh Anderson, Tom Wilson fight on the bench. When do we see that? But that same Josh Anderson not only finds the back of the net, but went at Tampa physically, as did Arbor Xhekaj. They are trying to drag Tampa into the mud and beat them at their own game in their own barn. And what did Tampa do? Put the Montreal Canadiens on the power play. So now here becomes that fine line, and John Cooper talked about this postgame. Here comes that fine line that Tampa's got to walk. How can you still maintain your identity as a tough team that competes as a pack and is, let's face it, dirty? As highly skilled as Tampa is, and I say this as a compliment, by the way. I'm not saying this as a pejorative. This is a compliment. Tampa's a dirty team, and that's fine, because dirty teams win playoff games and win playoff rounds and win the Stanley Cup. See your last 2 Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers. How can Tampa still play that game, knowing that if you put the Montreal Canadiens on the power play, they will really hurt you? It's almost like that Mike Babcock-led Detroit Red Wings team where we don't need an enforcer. Our power play is our enforcer. You're not going to do anything against us because you don't want to put yourself on the penalty kill. You don't want to give us the man advantage, and you do so at your own peril. And we can argue about the calls, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, the last thing Tampa wants to do right now is surrender as many power plays to Montreal as they did on Sunday. Anyhow, as we record this, it is the middle of Monday afternoon, and I just finished doing 45 minutes with one of the more thoughtful goaltenders from the previous generation in the NHL, Ryan Miller. And we talk about a lot of things. We talk about his experience with Buffalo. He talks about the fans. We do talk about the Olympics in 2010. He has a couple of really nice thoughts on Jonathan Quick, who's now retiring. Hasn't made it official yet, but he's calling it a career. I think you'll really enjoy this interview. It's lengthy, so settle in and buckle up and enjoy Ryan Miller, netminder, thoughtful netminder, here on the Hockey Lifers. Enjoy. First of all, Ryan, thanks so much for joining me here today. Much appreciated. Having watched Sunday's Buffalo Sabres Boston Bruins game, and we'll get to the sidebar and the history about the Boston Bruins, the Buffalo Sabres in a second. But the return to the playoffs for the Buffalo Sabres, like you were there the last time this team was good, bordering on great. And I do want to get into 2006 in a second, but what did you make of what we saw on Sunday evening?
I mean, it's two really good teams. I think Boston, has been a little bit underappreciated this year a little bit. I think they had a little bit of like slow start, right? So they really turned it on, and they got some really heavy players mixed in their lineup. And so it's going to be a great series. I was happy to see the Sabres get out to a good hockey game. They controlled the shots. They had the puck quite a bit, but I think turned it for them. Obviously, Tage Thompson just decided to do what he does and create some space for himself. But man, they really got in the forecheck really nicely in the third period. I think that kind of flipped it around for them. Where I think Boston, for the most part, they could group up and handle them coming into the zone and trying to make some plays. But once they really got on the forecheck and created that unpredictable, like where's the puck going to end up kind of moments, then Buffalo really looked in there. All their goals were off the forecheck.
Did you get the sense that all Buffalo needed to do was score one? And if they scored one, that a bunch were coming, because Jeremy Swayman was outstanding. And for two full periods, I'm saying to myself, Swayman's going to do this. Like Swayman's going to stick it to the Buffalo Sabres here. But did you not get the feeling that if Buffalo just got one, it would sort of open the floodgates?
Yeah, I mean, that's what you expect out of Swayman. He's a premier goalie in the league. And, he had a little mojo going there for a while, but I do think with the Sabres, it's just going to be kind of like a snowball going downhill. It's like once they get themselves going, I don't think you're going to stop. I think they just had to kind of shake that little bit off of that nervous excitement. And I think if they feel free to play and they feel excited, I think that they can definitely do some damage.
You have a thought on the Buffalo Sabres fans that we saw? Like, again, like it's been 14 years here, so it must have felt, after the anthems and then the opening puck drop to Tage Thompson's goal, it must have felt like the cork being popped out of a champagne bottle for all of those fans. It has been built up for so long. I mean, you were in Buffalo for a number of years and enjoyed a lot of success there. What can you tell us about Sabres fans?
I think everyone in the league, if you follow hockey, just even in the slightest, you know how passionate they are, and I think it's been such a long time for them to have that excitement. I think, like you said, it's a build up, and it was just fun to see when they're cutting to the cameras, showing the fans outside the arena and the antics kind of before the game, and then the excitement, in the arena for all the big moments. Then you cut to outside and the people surrounding the arena. It's just amazing to see that vibe in the city again, that kind of excitement. I just going back and remembering it, it just was so nice. I mean, it's double for Buffalo. So you get through the winter, you go to spring, and then everyone's excited about, springtime. And then you got springtime and, hockey going on. And it's kind of everything at once. It's pretty cool.
I got a text from someone who works with another NHL team who said, "Can you imagine if you were 25 years old in Buffalo tonight on Sunday after that game, leaving the key bank?" Because like, here's the thing that I've always maintained about the Buffalo Sabres is it's a wonderful market in the NHL, as you well know, whether it's, a Canadian team or two American teams playing, they always play the Canadian national anthem. So many people come from across the border. A lot of season tickets are sold in that St. Catharines Hamilton corridor. So there's always been like this sort of mutual hockey respect between America and Canada in Buffalo with the Sabres. And this goes all the way back to their inception in 1970. And the thing about their fans is it's a collection of Canadians and Americans coming around this one team, and it's like really, really blue collar. Like they're like, I hate to use the term real hockey fans, but they're like the blue collar hockey fans that have been around for a long time. I know attendance dips occasionally, but Sabres fans never go away. And even when Buffalo is out of the playoffs, you look at the national TV numbers, Buffalo's always a hot market. Like they don't stop watching hockey just when their team is out of the postseason. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you get that around town. Everyone has a sense of what's going on. I think they're very well educated in the sport. I mean, I thought it was great because you could kind of see it because the crowd was so into the game. You could see it late in the third period when there was the anticipation of a play. When a guy was on the, they were on the forecheck, they were hunting, they got the puck. You could see the crowd say, "Oh, okay, the play is there." They could all see it. I think on Samuelson's goal, that was the big one for me, where the crowd saw it happening and they got the payoff. Samuelson hits his spot and they take the lead, and it's just it's cool to see. There's not many markets I can really say have that feel. I loved going to Montreal to play because there's like an appreciation out there. Like if you did something well, it wasn't so much of a cheer, but like almost like a respect happening amongst the crowd. Like if I made a save that maybe was important or flashier than usual, like the crowd didn't applaud, but they appreciated it. And I think this kind of same intelligence when you talk about Buffalo fans, like they know the game and they're always going to pay attention. I mean, whether you're, for me, it's just always funny. Like I just always kind of go back and you got to go get groceries at some point. You got to get out and about, right? And it's just like I've had the most unassuming people kind of come up to me and give me pointers or something or feedback on a game. I've had little old ladies in their 80s come up, shuffle over and give me a hug, but then know what's going on in the game. It's just funny when you kind of get down to it. It's just a community that loves that all this is happening in their town, and they're all about it.
So the Sabres are playing the Boston Bruins, as we know. Sabres were up 1-0 as we recorded this interview. The Buffalo Sabres, I'm always fascinated with, sort of rivalries that get forgotten. Like there have been some great ones, like Montreal and Detroit. Once upon a time, Rocket Richard versus Gordie Howe. Like that was it. That was the rivalry in the NHL. That's gone now. That's dissipated. We'll see if it ever comes back. Certainly not the same way it was in the 1950s and 1960s, but I digress. But the Buffalo Sabres and the Boston Bruins have always occupied a really interesting space of quiet animosity towards one another, going back to the old Adams division days. As a matter of fact, the first time these two teams made a trade was 2009, and it was a Danny Paille deal. Now, there was an Andre Savard, Peter McNabb situation in the 70s, but that was free agent compensation, and it wasn't a trade. Like, these two teams stayed away from each other. Like, they were not going out of their way to help one another in trades, like on the ice or off the ice. When you played with the Buffalo Sabres, did you feel that with the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, certainly. I think in the time, most of the time I was there, they were a very, very strong team. I think there was certain points where they were trying to figure out who they were, and they were not as strong. But once they got kind of a certain personnel in there, and they kind of made their turn. Those are tough games. I think maybe a little bit is because we were looking for a similar identity. I think a lot of times we knew we'd have to be a skilled team coming out of the lockout. to win, but we had a certain element of speed and toughness always in our lineup. And I think, they were kind of having the reputation of, having some heavy players in there. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of like, maybe it's just our division overall. I remember Ottawa and a few of those teams having to have that element blended with an extreme amount of speed and skill. So I think we just ended up being kind of built similar, or aspiring to be similar at the same time.
It's interesting too, because you're right. Like your Buffalo Sabres team, like the accent, whether it's Drury, whether it's Briere, whether it's Kodalik, go right, Jason Palmanville, like the accent was on skill with your team. The goaltending was taken care of because of you. And I thought your blue line was really underrated as well. I'm a big Teppo Numminen fan.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, in that era, the hardest hit that I saw was delivered by a Buffalo Sabre. And it was against the Philadelphia Flyers when it was against RJ Umberger, and it was Brian Campbell. To this day, I don't know how RJ Umberger was able to get up. It was one of the most devastating body checks any of us had ever seen from someone who doesn't have a reputation of playing like that in Brian Campbell. What do you remember from that moment in the playoffs? Your Buffalo Sabres against the Philadelphia Flyers, and Brian Campbell catches RJ Umberger just underneath the Flyers' blue line.
Well, I think that was our first test, right? That was our round one. And it was our team came together kind of that year coming out of the lockout of just kind of like, okay, like who are these guys? We were ramping up towards something. And we were starting to play a way where we talked about how we had to play a certain style of hockey by the end of the year to beat certain teams to be a playoff contender. And we were checking off things as we went. And I think an element of that was to be able to be hard to play against. And, that was our first big test. And you saw a lot of guys understanding out of character moments had to be the norm. Like you got to step up and play. And I think that kind of set the tone for us. We won those first two games. We had a little bit of reality check going back to Philly and losing the next two. But they were very much a more veteran heavy team. I think we had probably more newcomers, but it was more like when we won at least the first game for us, it was like, okay, we can do this. We won the second game. Oh wow. Then being humbled, I think actually kind of helps, because it's like we had to regroup and see if we get the ship going the right direction. We ended up winning in 6 games. So yeah, you got to have those kind of moments. And Brian, tremendous skater is probably his reputation. Great skater, great puck mover on the back end. And, but those are the moments that were needed. He made a big play.
When I think back to your Buffalo Sabres career, there's so much to get into, and I want to dovetail into USA Hockey as well. But I do want to ask you about Jim Corsi, whose last name has taken on, with the rise of analytics, a whole new appreciation. The Corsi number, shots for, shots against, more complicated than that, but that's what it, at its very basis, sort of drills down to. What can you share with us about having Jim Corsi as your goaltending coach in Buffalo?
Well, Jimmy's just probably one of the nicest people on earth, for the first thing that people should know. But he's also extremely intelligent. His observations about the game from a different perspective, being goaltender background, having an education background as his, what he kind of felt was going to be his primary thing. And then coaching with us was, it was very new to have a full-time goalie coach. And like he was coming off being part-time, in and out. And I think more when I was there, he had just shifted more into being full-time. So it's kind of a new thing for everybody. Like we didn't really have full-time coaches all the time, but it was great to have him. He was the biggest cheerleader out there. I think more on the mental side, like he was just constantly available and constantly able to keep you, keep kind of the blinders on, not letting you swing too far outside. And we'd always have something to build towards. But his biggest thing, I think, was, being realistic with me about, okay, there's certain stages in your career you have to get to, and it was great to work with him in that way, because it's just like, okay, you can accomplish and then move towards the next task and how to become a great goaltender in the league. And he was a big cheerleader, but he's also somebody who can present ideas in a way where they're achievable. And that's what I really appreciated about Jimmy was that, and being in between the coach's office and his goaltenders was always nice too. So he stood up for us and kept Lindy at bay when he needed to.
How many times have you heard a coach say, "Does every tip have to go in?" And I can just imagine Jim jumping in there and say, hold on a second. Like, how many times have you heard coaches say that about goaltenders?
Oh, it was a lot. Those shouldn't go in. And the scariest times was, not scariest, but I just saying that to be funny. But like Jimmy would have to go out and scout or do something with the minor league teams or do whatever. And you'd be alone for a week or so with Lindy. And inevitably something would come up like, hey, you guys got to watch out for this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, Lindy, thanks. Or if we're, hopefully you're on a winning streak when that would happen.
I always look at a player's sort of peak season or, peak time of their career. There was, again, like, I want to take this to 2010 and the gold medal game in Vancouver, because like, I'm a Canadian, I'm watching the game, and there were moments where I'm like, nothing's getting past Ryan Miller. It doesn't matter what Canada does, nothing's getting past Ryan Miller. And you were MVP of the tournament, like just such a great tournament that you had. What were your takeaways from that tournament?
Well, I think before the tournament, I prepared myself for a long time, prepared really well, and tried to get in detail about it. And I think one of the deals I had made with myself was, if you can, because usually at that time we couldn't make it for the opening ceremony or closing ceremony. It's kind of just like, hey, you got to get on with the season. And I was like, if you got a chance to be in the closing ceremony, it means you're in the game, the gold medal game. It's like, no matter how it goes, you're going to walk, kind of vibe. Like, and so I was proud of our team, and it was hard to kind of recollect, but I think to sum it up, it's just kind of like, it sucked to lose, but I told myself I was going to do it. So that was kind of what sums it up. It was a great experience overall. You wish it would have, on our end, obviously, come out that slight bit different, but that's hockey, right? Things are going to happen. So
sure.
Yeah, just so proud of the way I handled it, proud of the team, the way we handled it. I think we were definitely not favored to be there at all. And we had a tremendous game plan. I think we executed really well. I think mentally everybody's in the same headspace. I think the staff did a great job with Brian Burke all the way down through the coaching staff. They had a message of how we were going to achieve things, but it was a different message to the media. Like, we were definitely underdogs to the media, but we were expected to do great things in-house. And the way they presented it was just really clean and really easy. And I think everyone bought in, and I think it nearly paid off. And, it was great. It's fun.
Under the umbrella of losses are data, and that as an athlete, you just continue to collect data all the way through your career, and you improve, you become a better player, and et cetera. Under the umbrella of losses are data, what did Ryan Miller learn, or what data was there to be collected from 2010?
Well, when I started seeing guys do the reverse VH on the post, I wanted to learn it pretty quick after Sid, changed what I thought was going to happen. Like I made a read off the play thinking this guy's got an amazing backhand. He's got time. The way the breakout got interrupted, he was going to cut to the net. And the way we used to play things was a little bit different. And I kind of overcommitted myself. So I was definitely going to learn how to play that more modern style as it was evolving, something where you saw early adopters, or maybe they just did it naturally. Like Jonathan Quick was already doing a lot of that, post integration and stuff like that. And something that in the couple of years after that, I remember working with Jonas Enroth on integrating that and taking new reads to different situations and stuff like that. Something we kind of take for granted now is certain plays. You kind of check off certain areas that are covered, and you kind of work around the areas that are already covered, and you think about other situations without having to worry about certain saves. It kind of eliminates the need to make certain motions. So that was a big one, just because the game was going that way already. I just kind of messing around, like that kind of stung to get burned on the making a bad read and then have to commemorate that every year.
Well, USA got the goal this. I know it stings, but like you turned in a sublime performance. I know hockey's a team sport, but within that, like you're the MVP, like you were the class of that tournament. One thing I've always wanted to ask you, because a lot of people are sort of fascinated about every time, frame by frame we go through this now, pixel by pixel. That's how we measure sports. I've always wondered, were you thinking I'm going to poke check here? That Sid's going to the net and I'm poke checking?
I thought you'd have to continue on and show the puck. I just think my read was he was going to have more than a step on all our guys because of the way the play got interrupted in the corner. It hits the ref and turns the play in not a weird way, but our guys were swinging up the wall kind of with the motion, and the puck doesn't do what they expect it to. So there's a little motion there where I was just kind of like, in my head, I was thinking he's going to pick it up. And having played against Sid for a while, I was just kind of like, he's going to have a really strong chance of pulling this to all the way into backhand. So I was just going to kind of, in my mind, I was going to interrupt it. And then he countered that by going skate to the shot. So, Sid wins.
I am curious about a couple of more things. You mentioned Jonathan Quick a second ago. Man, did I love watching him play. And it feels like, and you're a goalie and goalie consultant, like this sport and you understand how different goaltenders play. With Jonathan Quick retiring, does it feel like the end of an era for a specific way to play the position? I don't want to make it too simple, but it almost feels like from Hasek to Thomas to Quick, and that's the end of that lineage for that way to play. First of all, is that accurate? And do you have a thought on Jonathan Quick retiring?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to compete with him and be his teammate. And ironically enough, when I did end up out west, living out in California for a number of years now, we watched our sons play on the same team together a few times. They're far enough apart where they wouldn't be on the team in the regular season, but in some of the spring and summer extra skates, they were together. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, he had a way of playing, and interestingly enough, he has that reputation of being a throwback, but the way he used the posts and the way he set things up, he was actually kind of leading the way on a few things as well. So he's kind of like that blend between old school save maker and then new school setup, integrating into the post and stuff like that. So yeah, you do see a lot of what he kind of was naturally looking to do on the ice is probably in everybody's toolbox now, but he still had a lot of that old school save making ability where he's not just trying to go block the puck, he's trying to go catch it or knock it away or cover low part of the ice, the entire low part of the ice at certain points because he's so flexible. So yeah, it'll be a little bit sad for the old school guys to see him go, but he had a great career, obviously, big, championship player, Olympian. Yeah.
I thought 2010, you were the best goaltender on the face of the earth. In 2012, that torch went to Jonathan Quick. That 2012 season he turned in was elite. Do you have a thought on why we are seeing and who knows, like the goalie factory may move again. It seemed to go from Quebec to Helsinki to Stockholm to now it's in Moscow. Why we're seeing so many elite level Russian netminders, whether it's Andrei Vasilevsky still banging and he's going to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Young Askarov in San Jose is sort of, next to take that turn as well. When I look at Russian goaltenders, first thing I see is the skating is excellent. And I swear they don't have hips because the post play is just like seamless and almost elegant, if you will. But you're the goaltending expert. Are my eyes lying to me, or am I seeing the right things here?
No, I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out still with the Russians, because you do have some great ones who come over, and they do have a good solid foothold in the NHL right now. But I would argue there's a lot of strength in the American group as well, where I could actually kind of point to why they're having success compared to maybe where Canada was talking, they're starting to get thin. It's funny, like the reason I thought Canada was, having some trouble was they're just so easily replacing goalies in the junior leagues. Like, guys get hot and cold and hot and cold. I mean, they're teenagers. They're learning, they're trying to figure it out, and they're getting replaced constantly if they're not performing. So I think that you don't have as many people surviving with enough games, or the few that get through are they're not getting quite the kind of like with the college guys, where you see like Hellebuck, Ottinger, Demko. They had like kind of like a safe space after juniors to go for like 3 years or so. I think most of them played about 3 years in college, and they didn't have to flip it or change. If you're playing pretty well in college, they're not going to risk bringing a different guy in. Usually, it's a little harder to do, and that now gets flipped on its head with the portal and the NIL money and like all this stuff. So that whole college model is flipping on its head, and I don't know. I have trouble explaining the whole Russian thing too, because I think Russia is absolute jungle. You got guys over there who come in and they're good enough, and you scout them, they look great, and they'll play like 15 games a whole year because they got a guy who's a couple of years older than them, or in some teams are they'll have 3-4 guys who legitimately can play, and sometimes 6 guys will play in a year on one team, and we're not even talking about injuries. We're just talking about that's how they just rotate things. So maybe it's just they're so good because they have to survive the absolute jungle and just survival of the fittest, Darwinism, whatever you want to call it. Maybe that's why Russians are coming out like that. Plus they can develop a little longer, right? Because they get drafted here, they have a longer timeline till they have to come over. There's development. I guess.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone not too long ago. There's one conversation that we don't have in hockey anymore, which used to dominate the conversation. And one of the things that I always admired about you is you were never shy to voice your opinion about things, specifically goaltending issues. And I think you did a lot of good. I really do, like for explaining to people the situations around goaltenders and what the issues around goaltenders are. We never talk about making the equipment smaller anymore. I remember Alain Vigneault once said, well, like, look, if the shooters have a problem with the goalies and they think the equipment's too big, they should learn how to shoot better. And he said something along the lines of like, goaltenders in the summer go and work on their game. The players just go and lift, and they just go and get stronger. Like, go work on your game. And now for the first time in the NHL since 1996, save percentage is under 900. Now, I don't just think that's because it's advantage shooter. I think the way they count shots now has changed. But still, do you have a thought on why it's sort of swung back a little bit here to advantage shooter? And considering it's a sub 900 save percentage NHL, Ryan Miller, should we have the conversation that we need to make the equipment bigger now?
Wouldn't that be fair? Yeah, no, I was on the competition committees when we were, scaling the equipment down. I was working with Kay Whitmore, and we spent a lot of time trimming things down to proportional sizing. And I guess I don't like to admit it to a lot of people publicly, but I was part of all that, where we were scaling things to body type.
Yep.
And yeah, I think we ended up in a pretty fair space. We still have to have a really hard black piece of rubber flying on frozen surface. Like it hurts. And I can tell you by my hand surgeries how much it hurts. Like, you have to have a certain amount of equipment. And that's just the fact. Like, you have to have a certain amount of protection, and that's what's fair. If you're going to play 84 games coming up soon as a minimum,
Yep.
you have to have a certain level of protection. So there's that, where I think we are at a good place with the goalie stuff. As far as the goal scoring, I think it's probably just a measure of where the league's at. I think a little bit younger, a little bit more run and gun. I think there's a little more of a standard on the officiating that I think is probably good, where if a guy's in a scoring situation or trying to get to a scoring situation and you take away his advantage that he's probably gained over you, then there's a lot more calls, where I think he benefited from an increase at Buffalo of power play time based on our team and how we were pretty fast. We got a lot of power play time because hooking and holding was on the docket. But I think even now, I think that there's just a lot more space, and a little bit of it is the league, a little bit younger. I think, or at least it feels that way to me. Little less emphasis on certain defensive play, a little more risk taking in the system is allowed. I think you see some plays that don't work, and I look back and I'm like, that kid would have been in the press box for a month with that play. But he's out. But he's out the next shift, and like, that's the culture of hockey. I mean, if you're going to win, I think the feeling is you're going to win by going for it, a little bit more than probably in the past. You have to have a certain amount of scoring, and you have to have a certain amount of puck control, and you can't do that by being passive all the time. So I think a lot of things blended together, and when you get all that, goaltending is still really, really hard. It's not a big object to stop. Puck's moving fast. Guys are really talented at hitting their spots and moving the puck, and they're just getting that opportunity to do it. And I think that kind of proves the point. It's a very highly skilled game.
And everybody can shoot, and everybody can shoot hard. And I'm curious, because you faced off against prime Ovi, and you faced off against prime Sidney Crosby. You've already had a little conversation about Sid as well. I am curious, what was it like facing Ovechkin in his prime? Like, is it intimidating? Is it challenging? What do you do?
It is, until you meet him, because then on the ice he's just talking to you the whole time, and he's got the big accent, and he wants to get your attention, and he wants to have some fun. So it's interesting, because he's just having a blast out there, and I was a more serious player. But then I kind of, it kind of brings to the forefront, like, well, I'm going to have fun. I'm trying to stop Alex. Like, he's one of the best players in the world. Like, there's a fun element to it. Like, because if I can get to the end of the game and we can win, it's just a lot of fun, right? So he was dangerous in a lot of different ways. He had enough skill to make plays, but he had a lot of that brute force, where I think most of his one-timers are they're all just dirty, just, it could be any kind of puck. He could just hit a puck that was rolling, it's going to come off, it's going to go, could tail up, it could sweep down, it's like facing a pitcher who's got a lot of junk, I think.
Yeah.
And if you sit behind the plate and you can really see what spin does to a ball, like, and you got Ovi with like every single curve possible on a stick. He's got like a heel with a twist, with a toe curve, and he's a massive, and he's just a strong, massive human. So if he catches the puck, even if it's got a little wobble to it, if it's flat, if it's on end, those are all coming off different. If it's off the toe, if it's off the middle, he's just swinging sometimes. It's like, you got guys who their shot looks exactly the same every time, and it becomes a little bit predictable, and the spin's the same, and the trajectory is about the same. And with Ovi, it's just kind of like, if he's getting the one-timer, if you got fresh ice, it's pretty flat, it's going to spin a certain way. If it's a little bit wobbly, who knows? but he's going to probably put it through you. And I don't know, he's just dangerous in a lot of ways. And so it was a challenge, and looking back, it was fun.
Was he the hardest shot to get a read on? And I'm curious about this. Like, Ovechkin's shot was different than like Thomas Vanek on the Buffalo Sabres, different than like take your pick. Was he the hardest to get a read on, the way the puck came off his blade?
Just strictly speaking to the one-timers, I think sometimes, in tight by the net, sometimes he kind of outthink himself. Didn't really get the shots off he wanted to. Like, I think from distance he was harder. I think other guys were a little bit better from in close. Just a little softer with it. But, I don't know. I think just hardest to read because he was just going to swing. Some guys would stop their motion if it's not a good pass, or wobbling a little bit because they can't control it. But he was just so strong, he would just swing through, almost like a lacrosse shot sometimes, where the puck would just stay on his blade and just kind of whip. So, yeah, it was really difficult, but the challenge is there. It was fun to face those kind of guys, and especially him.
For sure. Okay, two more for you. One, how do you feel about where goalie interference is right now in the NHL?
I know that it always kind of comes up to the fans. When I retired, I went to work for the league with the hockey ops with Colin Campbell and Kay Whitmore helped bring me on. And that was one of the things we tried to do, is kind of really clean that up and get a clear explanation. And I think they've done a good job of, when a player enters the crease under his own power, that's really been the big distinction I think we were able to get across while I was there, at least, was if you go into the crease and the goalie's in the crease, it's really plain. It's going to be no goal. It gets a little harder with the defensive players surrounding and pushing. Did he enter on his own? I think we saw some of that in the Kings game in Colorado.
Yeah, with Jack Drury and Drew Doughty. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they let that one kind of go because, they called it back because, Doughty doesn't really make a motion towards him. He's just establishing ice, and he has a right to that ice. And the guy entering that same ice, he's under an obligation to kind of know what's going on as well. He can't just say, oh, no, I'm going to go in the crease, so I got to bail out, and I'm irresponsible, right? Like, when you get down to it, these are NHL players. Like, these guys can stop on a dime. So having played a long time, I know you can really tell when a guy's selling it. And I think that's what they try and do in the room, is really have experienced guys who know, and they have a referee in the room. They have a lot of good people in the room trying to make the right call. I don't think it's as egregious as people think, where it's just like they're rolling the dice and seeing what happens. There's definitely a standard, and it's hard to get right every time. You're trying to allow for the plays to unfold. You're trying to allow for, goals to happen. So I don't know. It's
I'll tell you that Kings Colorado situation, the Drury and Doughty with Anton Forsberg, I kind of looked at it like, you played, so you can tell me whether I'm like way off base here. Drury's cutting to the net. He sees that he's going to go into the crease, so he tries to avoid the crease for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Doughty's skating backwards. To your point, he has a right to that ice. Doughty's not 21 years old. Doughty's been around. Like, I think Doughty knows exactly what he's doing. Jack bumps into him, bumps into Forsberg. He turns his right shoulder. Puck goes in. That thing gets called off. But I just have a kind of a hard time going like, hey, Doughty's just taking his side. Like, I think that Doughty knows what he's doing. Like, this is not his first game.
Yeah, but I also don't think Doughty's projecting, like, if I hit him into our goalie and this goes in, then we get the call. Like, he's just saying this guy's not getting ice in front of my goalie. And just because he took a bad route doesn't mean I have to give it to him.
Fair.
That's my comment to that. He's responsible still for you flying that fast by the crease. You got to be able to figure it out.
I was always told, think in terms of liability. And if you go in the blue, your liability goes sky high, no matter what happens. The old saying, if you're in the blue, that's on you. Let me end this. When I put these words together, what comes to mind? Anaheim, Sudsy, Honda Center, basement, tennis balls.
My rehab after tearing my MCL. A lot of work down there, trying to get creative ways to take some shots while I couldn't move properly. So, puck shooting machines, lots of other stuff.
and tennis ball shooting machine. I understand like those workouts were pretty intense.
Yeah, we had to get creative. I wanted to come back, and I mentioned to Sudsy, I was like, man, like, it's going to be about a 6-week, thing where I couldn't do anything, 6 to 8 weeks. And it was in the middle of the season. I think it just tied the American record, and I had the game I got hurt was kind of getting away from us on the wrong way, but it was going to be another 8 weeks before I could get another crack at it. I was just like, I really want to, have a chance this season. I'm getting older.
Yeah.
Like, I want to have a chance. So I gotta see pucks. I can't go 2 months without like seeing like hard shots. And the diagnosis was basically like, you need to stay well away from the ice. Nothing where you can do anything, in that motion. So, yeah, Sudsy made it happen. He had some fun with it. I think he had. I think he really liked that.
I heard you came out of those sessions just dripping. They had to get you out of there with a soup ladle because you were working so hard. So that's no surprise.
You're not on the ice. You're not on the ice. You're down in the basement. No air. Down in the bowels of the rink. Yeah.
I love it. Ryan, this has been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for taking time for me today. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing some memories and thoughts about the Buffalo Sabres as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. No problem.
Okay, so that's Ryan Miller here on the Hockey Lifers. We thank Ryan Miller for his time and his thoughts as well. One of the things, again, when you have someone like Ryan Miller on, you can do hour upon hour upon hour. One of the enduring images for me, and perhaps for a lot of people, for Ryan Miller, isn't just the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, but also the Winter Classic, or as I like to call it, the Snow Globe game. From a visual point of view, like the game itself, it wasn't the best played game. I mean, snow and the way it was coming down and in sheets at times. It wasn't ever going to be a great game. But as far as like the visual presentation of a game, that was as close as we've ever come to having what we like to refer to as a snow globe game that kept getting shaken up after every single whistle. That's why we saw the shovels out there so much, and the enduring image of Ryan Miller, toque and all, at that one is still one of the great images. Like when the great book of hockey is written, there will be a significant paragraph on that game, Pittsburgh Penguins and the Buffalo Sabres at the Winter Classic. Just looked so spectacular. Just looked gorgeous. I just loved everything about it. Speaking of the Buffalo Sabres, Game 2 on Tuesday evening here. What do we see? Game 1 was a banger, almost stolen by Jeremy Swayman. The old saying, "You're not in trouble until you lose at home." Buffalo Sabres up 1-0 in this one, and the crowd will be loud. They probably haven't even sobered up going back to Sunday. Let's just be honest. Anyhow, Hockey Lifers back next week right here. Hope you can join us.